So with that said, kind of touching a little bit on Genie, obviously, Ari and Chao, you were coming at it from where you are a vendor, where you're representing a vendor that does that type of self-service analytics. So I'll ask this question to Jepson and Joe. Uh, there is a lot of back and forth on whether the concept of self-service analytics is a real thing or a real possibility to attain or not. I'm curious as to your thoughts as to Jepson, from your perspective. Um, do you see a future where perhaps the junior analyst roles are overall not needed as much? And Joe, I'm curious from your perspective as well on this.
I hope so. I actually want to take it a step further, and I see a future where you have agents that are doing preliminary just analysis and finding value on their own while you're sleeping. So imagine waking up in the morning and having a dashboard or stack ranked report of all the analysis that could have been done by humans but was done by agents instead. So I'm hoping for that future. I don't see any reason why, especially using Databricks or other technologies underneath the hood, that should be fine.
What about your thoughts, Joe?
It's interesting. The term self-service has been bandied about in the industry for a long, long time. I'm sure all the grizzled veterans have heard various versions of self-service. But to me, what self-service means today is the ability for data to be accessible by theoretically anybody in an organization and useful to anybody in an organization. I think first and foremost, believable to anybody in an organization. But I mean, hopefully this comes about. Like I'm. So what gets in the way of self-service right now? I think it's an interesting question that I can maybe pose to the broader group. Um, in my perspective, at least, what gets in the way is usually the underlying data. It tends to be modeled in a way that's maybe represents one aspect of an organization, but doesn't more broadly address the understandability or the needs, of the broader organization. And so this is the classic dilemma of, well, what do you mean by customer? Well, or that kind of thing, right? Something we've been dealing with this for decades. Um, and so, hopefully this is addressed. Maybe I think the incorporation of knowledge graphs and LLMs hopefully provides generalizability and context that's sorely needed because the manual ways we've been trying to address self-serve analytics over the past few decades, I think, is we've been trying that. We beat that thing to a bloody pulp, and I would say we're no farther along than we have been. So I'm open to new ideas, new technologies. I think it's really the way it's going to be, and I've been talking about this more in the broader context of data management as well, where I feel like we've been crying the same old tropes for a long time. Like we need to get more value from our data and all this stuff. I'm like, great. Tell me how we've been doing that over the past couple of decades. It's manual, it's rough, right? And you're dealing with organizational stuff, but uh, more broadly, there's an interesting article I was reading yesterday, Programming Mutter, I think it was, or something like that. But it was this article where it talked about how LLMs provide a really good opportunity to actually change the nature of management as well in organizations. And so I think this really cuts to more of the crux of why self-serve is hard because at the end of the day, you're trying to manage data and you're trying to summarize data and trying to make it accessible across various domains. Well, LLMs are pretty good at this actually, right? And so I think this potentially unlocks a lot of the capability that so far has been in the hands of people wearing black robes and living in shielded data governance guilds and so forth. And hopefully this opens up some possibilities. But at the rate that data is being generated, I mean, it's inconceivable that humans can somehow magically come to the occasion today when we haven't been able to do it on kilobyte and megabyte sized data sets in the past. So I'm hopeful. We'll see.
Yeah, and that problem is getting more and more vast as data has just been exploding. Like the challenge of like master data management. You mentioned like who is a customer. At the beginning of a company, they may have one table, one column with customer data, and then it's easy. But over time, you may have thousands of tables or tens of thousands of tables and columns, and either it's like customer underscore LPL, customer underscore NP7, and like nobody really knows what that is, or it's in someone's head, or you have everything that has the word customer and it's non-descriptive. So this is where I think we're at, end of 2024 through 2025 is using LLMs to make sense of like what the underlying data is, then making it easier for if somebody says, what is a customer? It knows, hey, they're in the marketing department or they're in Europe. They may only be caring about European customers, whatever it is, helps it. But then back to Jepson's point, you want humans in the loop to reinforce it. So having humans have the ability to give a thumbs up, thumbs down, retype it, or just have the AI learn as hundreds or thousands of people are asking questions, like maybe pop, like what Google did, pop the most seemingly accurate ones to the top. So that's where I'm super excited about. And I know Chao had mentioned AI/BI Genie, and not sure if everyone knows what that is, but that's kind of the crux. And whether it's AI/BI Genie or the market as a whole I think everyone's going to be implementing more intelligence into everything through AI onto traditional, BI data warehouse.
But
Yeah, it's worth noting that self-service doesn't necessarily imply there's no humans involved at all. Self-service is hopefully just getting to a state where if you're trying to define something across the organization, you do it once. You don't have to end up having to redo it over and over again as you ask an analyst a question, go chase after stuff, etc. I mean, take a classic metric of retention. There's 15 million different ways you can define it. So sometimes self-service is about sort of surfacing what you propose as a definition and then creating the right collaboration so that whoever needs to decide on what the correct definition is across the organization can actually do so efficiently. And then beyond that point, yeah, teach it to a human, teach it to an LLM, teach it to everyone, and hopefully everyone can consistently use it as is.
And I'll add two notes on this. I think, Joe, to your point, I personally like the BI world and the data engineering world. That's a lot near and dear to my heart. I'd say it's a combination of just bad data modeling practices, really, and as well as, sounds very generic, but let's take aside. Let's say you have good data models in place. I think comes from technical individuals not educating non-technical individuals, their end business users, really how to use the very bare minimum for being able to do their reporting themselves. It's more like, hey, here's this model, here's revenue, nothing. Being able to explain, hey, this is the type of reporting that is possible with this. This is the type of reporting that you can't do. And I think technical people tend not to be very patient or take the time to educate the business users that are not technical on how to use these tools. I think that's one of the problems. And I will kind of, to some extent, challenge back Ari on, okay, so we have LLMs doing self-service analytics, okay, or helping with self-service analytics. But then how do you deal with hallucinations, right? Which I know is one of the things that Genie is working hard on. But then if you become too dependent on pure LLMs as they are right now when it comes to data, it could lead to some bad business decisions.
Yeah, and so that's like awesome topic. That's one of the biggest challenges. Like so many companies start off saying we want to do a chatbot, which is one of the many implementations of LLMs. And then there could be either hallucinations or answers that are not quite the way you want to frame it. So it ends up being, most companies make their chatbots internal to have like employees. Like I use, it's called Marge. It's a marketing genie to find, what events were most successful, what ebooks were downloaded most. And that's kind of harmless, but helpful as well. But companies are still hesitant to put things out to their customers, since even if it's accurate, 99 out of 100 times, if 1 out of 100, it says, we will pay you money to buy our product, or it's a negative price, the media would eat it up. So, companies are doing a couple things. One is making the models like on open source as opposed to closed models, making the models called agentic systems, where you have smaller models that are really good on predicting traffic, predicting weather, or predicting sales, or things like that for little cases, and then stringing them all together so it's hopefully more accurate. Open source versus closed. But then I think the most important thing is having the data trained on your own corporate data. Since if you use a generic LLM, it's trained on Taylor Swift, it's trained on World War I statistics or trivia, but you want it trained on your own data, and making sure, like, it's this whole, Jepson and I worked on machine learning ops, and now it's AI ops. What happens when the data drifts? What happens when the model drifts? Like, who's in control? Who gets to decide if a model's good enough to go into production? So those are ways that you reduce hallucination and get trust. And that's really where the whole industry is, scratching their heads. How can they improve to keep pushing the line and making that more accurate?
That's fair.
One thing I'll add is, in addition to all the traditional ways you can actually try to improve model accuracy, some of the more interesting challenges, at least as we've been developing AIBI, has also been around sort of just UX design. How do you actually sort of present the information when it's not necessarily always going to be trustworthy? And how do you actually present a blend of information where some of it has been verified by experts and some of it has not? So that's something that we've been really trying to figure out good solutions around, in basically getting to a place where the model doesn't have to always be accurate. That there's going to be holes in its understanding, but then as the customer uses it, can you actually adapt to their level of knowledge, their level of ability to verify the model output, and try to actually sort of guide them toward treating it in the right way, depending on whether you have enough trust in the system.